So we've got a little bit of board game theory here, and it's interesting to see how quick and fast board gaming has grown from the 80s to the 90s to now. And I believe that originally there was this idea of war games. Then we moved to board games. Then we moved to role-playing games. Now we have a fusion of the two. And now we're moving to something much bigger. And I wanted to kind of put that theory out there, put that theory to the test, and then turn things over to you, my fellow board gaming enthusiasts and hobbyists. What do you think? And I'll just throw this out here right now, and then I'll build my case. Virtual board gaming and board gaming apps on there. And I don't mean virtual versus analog. I mean apps as the next evolution. So one of the reasons why I love wargaming is the fact that we're creating a narrative on the tabletop. We've got 3D terrain, we've got smoke effects, we've got battle effects, we've got miniatures, we've got paints. Everything's one-to-one. It's almost like an old school 80s movie set on there. But that is a commitment. That is a commitment of time, of space, of hobby, and that's part of the hobby, growing and building your army. But there are times when you want a much smaller experience, or the scale is going so big that the game needs to be better codified and better represented. And what we see this with traditional war games from the 70s and the 80s, and then early Avalon Hill, hex-based war games, where now essentially you were moving World War II massive units and massive battles represented by counters and tokens, very, very tactical. The great part about this is that it allowed you to jump in with a very small barrier to entry. It allowed you to get a massive gaming experience that would be harder or impossible to replicate one-on-one, and you could have many, many titles in your gaming library. But if we look at it, it was one-to-one. I'm playing the Allies, you're playing the Axis. I'm flying for this side, you're flying for that side. There were a couple of outliers back in the day, and I still love it. Web and Starship, 3-player type war game, sci-fi on there, but essentially it's player versus player, PvP. Then we started to see, so that's maybe the 80s, we get into the later 80s, early 90s, somewhere around there, we start to see the first Overlord model, the first one versus many model. If we look at Hero Quest, now yes, it's fantasy, but we have this idea, and this is where role-playing, as role-playing games took off, I mean wargamings took off, as role-playing games took off, the Holy Grail, and we could argue in a side quest, does Gloomhaven, does Gloomy capture this? And I love Gloomy, but the Holy Grail of gaming is the Dungeons & Dragons RPG experience, where I don't have to do the work, you don't have to do the work as a DM, and we all get to play. We saw this codified in Hero Quest, where you had Zargon, you're playing the wizard, and you have the minions, and you have the bosses, and the players go in and explore, and cards and dice kind of create that experience. Yes, it was simplistic compared to Gloomhaven or other games out now, but at the time, it was revolutionary, and I still enjoy me some Hero Quest on there, but one versus many. In my mind, Descent First Edition, and this is not going to be like a First Edition, Second Edition type critique, but First Edition was the pinnacle of that experience. A refined Overlord/DM experience with minions and spawns and tactics and cards and powers, a refined player experience with development, characters, a shop experience, a campaign, everything on there. Now and then we move to, I'm giving really well-known examples, Zombicide Modern, where the AI is controlled by the game now, and one could argue whether it's a dice chuck or simplistic or not. Gloomhaven, actually, let's throw Gloomhaven out there. The game handles it all. You have an AI, Dark Souls, the board game. If we look at something like Kingdom Death Monster, it could be a simple AI, it could be a complicated AI. There's a script on the mission. So we can see this evolution where you and I fight each other, then you and I fight another player. Now we're all playing the game together. And it's at the point I find for myself, I enjoy a variety of board gaming titles, and I have a lot in my collection. But more and more these days, I prefer to play completely co-op on there. When I want head-to-head, look, we're going to go war games. When I want to do the DM thing, we'll do D&D. But I want to play a co-op game. I want us to strategize together. I want us to play together. I want us to have that experience together and kind of push that way. So it's an interesting evolution. So now I think the next step, and we're starting to see this, the idea of an app, the idea of taking the board game AI that we all play and really pushing it up to that level that goes beyond physical cards and tables and rolling dice and stuff, where you have an app handling the overlord, the dungeon master, the co-op aspect, and all the players are playing together on there. It's intriguing. It's interesting on there. What is going to be the next player-to-player board game interaction, and how do you see board gamings evolve in that next kind of 5-year gaming period?